Okay, we began this series with the question of when are students ready for the concept of square root? And you'll see now why that becomes such an important question. I'm going to say, I'll go back and look at Professor Wilderberger, Wild About Trig, down in Australia. I hope things are going better for you down there. And Khan Academy, JMT Patrick, www.betterexplained or explainedbetter.com. But let you know that if you look at a best practice in terms of learning something about the circle and something about a specific circle, it oftentimes comes back to owning a discussion of what is known as the unit circle. In my experience, the unit circle can be different for everybody. With the military students I've had, I couldn't be wrong on this, but the fact of being off at 1 kilometer, how far off your round would be, or a football player at, kind of a strong football player, at 100 yards or 100 meters, how far off you would be if you were off 1 degree or something like that, is where in fact the knowledge of breaking down the circle into logical slices comes. Now, I'm going to start with how it's presented around the web and around the world, and we're going to talk about why sometimes 80% of what you get is easy and you grab it, but sometimes that last 20% which is what takes you to mastery. So we're going to present now, as does 50,000 other different people, the concept of the unit circle. The unit circle has a radius of 1. And I'm going to kind of do my job to try to look a circle that's kind of not bad. It has a radius of 1. Now, as does everyone else, probably stealing this directly, you know the definition, if you would, of pi being the circumference divided by diameter. And so you have to realize here that if the radius equals 1, the diameter equals 2, and that becomes important later. But then if you go to circumference, so the circumference equals 2 pi r. Now, the reality is, right, that comes from the definition of pi. So learning this as the equation is probably not the thing to do. You want to learn the definition of pi, which is one of those important things to know, the circumference divided by the diameter. And if you need to do this, do it. If you don't need to do it, do it. The answer is not 3.1415, whatever that is. It is the circumference divided by the diameter, and you'll see there's lots of fun different ways to know that. And of course then the area equals pi times r squared, which means in the end that the circumference of the unit circle is 2 pi. The area is pi, and later on you're going to learn that the angle of revolution, the entire angle, is equal to 2 pi something called radians, which you're going to see are unit lists. So there is a certain succinctness and building on the knowledge of the unit circle that takes you from 1 angstrom, which would be 1 times 10 to the minus 10th meters, up to 1 foot, 1 meter, 1 millimeter, 1 inch, 1 kilometer, 1 mile, because the unit of the unit circle can be anything you want. And once you start with the right unit circle, you can go with some twice as big as the unit circle. And that's in fact where betterexplained.com does a great job. Khalid, thank you, Khalid. Okay, so with this said, here's how many of us learn just the first part of the first quadrant of the unit circle. First off, you have to realize is this is the center of the unit circle is at 0, 0. And I like to tell people in the short term there's always a third coordinate there. But I won't do for this one. This is basically, you're going to think about this being the x and the y coordinate system, and this is the origin. And that from that, you know that this is 1 in the x, and this is 0 in the y, and this is 0 in the x and 1 in the y. You can fill it all the way around, and we'll do that in another video, but just learning this first quadrant, because it's Boy George-rific, and the Culture Club is coming back this week. You'll see that in a second. What you then do, and you want to do a reasonably good job on this, is you take halfway across the radius here, and take a little kind of dashed line up there to divide up that radius in two, take halfway up this radius in two, and realize that the construction here gives you a 45-degree line. But we don't want to think about 45 degrees. We want to think about 2 pi, pi, pi over 2, pi over 4. So this angle here is pi over 4. I'll put that out here. This angle here, 2 pi, pi, pi over 3, pi, pi, pi over 3, pi over 6. And later on you're going to see we'll eventually fill this in with more information than that. So, why these particular ones? Because it's so pretty how it works out. And so the way you go about doing this is you're going to be able to pull off the coordinates of the circle by a nice, easy, fun Polish-German construction for those of you who like the polka. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you're going to do it this way. You're going to remember that the first value here is the x, and the second value is the y, but also that the first value is the cosine of the angle, and the second value is the sine of the angle. And the angle would be the angle from the standard position angle, or the x-axis. And then you go about doing this. I'm going to do it out here. Hopefully I don't run out of space on the screen. Open parentheses, open parentheses. Open parentheses, open parentheses. Open parentheses, open parentheses. Here's for the Boy George. Comma, 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 chameleon. Look it up if you don't know Boy George. All right, and then however you do it, but I just do this. Over 2, over 2, over 2. Over 2, over 2, over 2. Now you get the Polish side first. 1, 2, 3. And you get the German side on the other side. 1, 2, 3. And here now is why, in fact, you need to have the square root concept to get this to work. To finish this out correctly, you need to take the square root of 1, which is 1. You take the square root of 2, and you take the square root of 3. You take the square root of 1, which is 1. You take the square root of 2 and the square root of 3. And in that, you have, in fact, the cosine and the sine of pi over 3, or 60 degrees. The cosine and the sine of 45, which if you're at the 45th parallel, is where the North Star is. And the cosine and sine of 30 degrees, or pi over 6. From that later you'll see we want to know that the definition, and I'm going to erase this out with my handy dandy eraser. You want to do this. Remember that the tangent equals the sine over the cosine. And in that you have a check because in fact you should know that the tangent of 45 degrees, or the tangent of pi over 4, is 1. That is why, and that is from where, the knowledge of the square root can be added to the knowledge of the circle. And think about all those kids in China doing the dance. Who knows if they're doing the dance, but they're learning it. Circumference divided by the diameter. The diameter is 2 radii. That is, in fact, the knowledge, the starting knowledge of the unit circle upon which you can build to leverage beyond those 390 math facts. So, to review, a unit circle is a circle with a 1 unit radius, therefore it has a 2 unit diameter. But if it has a 1 unit radius, its circumference is equal to 2 pi, its area is equal to pi, and it has an included angle of 2 pi radians, and radians are unitless, so its its angle is 2 pi. You can divide it up by taking the bisector of the radii here and forming a pi over 3, a pi over 4, and a pi over 6 angle coming up from here, there, and there. And then opening up your parentheses and opening up your mind to the culture club. Parentheses, comma, 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 chameleon, over 2, over 2, over 2, over 2, over 2, over 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 2, square root of 3. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 2, square root of 3. That combined with the knowledge of the x-axis being 1, 0 and the y-axis being 0, 1, and the fact that in each of these ordered pairs, the first number is the cosine and the second number is the sine, will get you a long way to learning more about those computer games we're going to be working with than you ever thought possible when you were just playing, I don't know, SimCity. Must be pretty old. So, thanks for listening. We'll keep this going. We'll see how you like it, hate it, and we'll start filling it in pretty quickly with some of the fun tools available on Google SketchUp, Mathematica, and a few other places. Once again, thanks to Khan Academy, www.Khan Academy, K-H-A-N, JMT Patrick, BetterExplained.org, and Mathematica's coming. Thanks for listening.